Welcome back. All right, so I haven't done a 32 player video in a while. 32 teams, 32 players, and I want to talk about players who are on expiring contracts today and UFA status at the end. So I'll do a video as well on guys who are restricted free agents next summer. There's two different kinds of unrestricted free agent contract years. You're either looking to cash in, or you might be looking at your last chance. And some of the guys that I come up with on this could be one and could be the other. So if you just fast forward to the end, understandable. But if people complain, well, I don't understand why this guy's on there. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I don't even go to the comment section and really try to explain anymore. People just complain. So we'll start off with Anaheim. Anaheim, Hampus Lindholm. He's in a final year of a contract. The cap hit for him this year is $5.205 million. Lindholm didn't play a lot of games last year. Definitely dealing with injury. He's going to want to stay healthy. And he could cash in next summer. And he would have a decision to make then about whether he wants to do that in Anaheim and help see this team through the rest of the rebuild, or if he wants to move on somewhere else where maybe the pastures are a little greener. Arizona. So this is going to be the first player that may very well be moved before the season starts or during the season. Probably won't be the last. Phil Kessel, who's in the final year of a deal with a cap hit of $6.8 million. Kessel, there's been rumors about Arizona looking to move on from Phil throughout the summer. It hasn't happened yet. It may happen now that I'm posting this video. But either way, Phil Kessel at this point is still Arizona property. And since he's an unrestricted free agent next summer, Arizona, the expectations are low. I'd be very surprised if he's still with the team at the deadline. For Boston, there's really only one name for Boston. Patrice Bergeron stayed healthy for most of last season. He only missed, I think, 2 games. He and the Bruins, I think, will get it done. But at this point where I'm recording it, he has got 1 year left, $6.875 million cap hit. I would expect an extension of maybe 2 or 3 years, cap hit to stay about the same. Bergeron's never been in this as much to get rich as he's been in this to, be a good teammate, good leader. Now he's the captain, and understandably so. Buffalo. Buffalo doesn't have a lot. I've got to be honest. Buffalo, there are not a lot of guys who are UFAs next summer. So I'm going with Cody Eakin. And for Cody Eakin, this may be his last go around, right? $2.25 million. So again, as an unrestricted free agent, may get traded at the deadline. That is quite possible. And again, with Buffalo, much like Arizona, it's highly unlikely that they're in a position to make the playoffs. Eakin may very well be a rental at the deadline. Calgary. So for Calgary, can only be one guy. We've already heard a lot of rumors about whether or not he's going to stick around. And it's interesting because with a cap hit of $6.75 million for Johnny Gaudreau, if the Flames don't have a great season, let's just say the Flames aren't in a playoff spot, does Brad Treliving look to move him at the deadline? Especially, if he can't get him signed to an extension and if they're miles apart on that, does Johnny Gaudreau find himself somewhere else at the deadline? So that's a storyline I think might be worthy to watch if you're a Flames fan or even if you're not. Carolina. I'll spell it with his given name, but I don't know that there's very many people that call him Vincent. It's basically Vinny Trocheck. And again, at the deadline, that $4.75 million cap hit, if he were available at the deadline, I don't think he will be. There'd be a lot of takers. So Trocheck, I would expect him to stay in Carolina based on how last season went for him. I think it's a good fit between himself and the Carolina Hurricanes. But Trocheck would be a fascinating one if we do get close, if we do get to that deadline. And again, it's a matter of which teams at the deadline are going to look at unrestricted free agents to be and say, you know what, we don't want to lose this guy for nothing. So Trocheck, we'll see what happens. Chicago. I went back and forth on Chicago. So I'm going to put one name on the board because it may be the final year of his career. I think he's going into this as if it might be the final year of his career. And that's Marc-Andre Fleury at $7 million. But what's interesting is, and I made note of this, Kevin Lankinen, $800,000 cap hit. He's an unrestricted free agent next summer. So look for Chicago to sit down with Lankinen at some point this season and try to work out a deal. Because Fleury at $7 million, and if this is the final year of his career, and again, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me if it was, they need a starter to replace him next season. And Lankinen, all indications are Lankinen is ready and capable of being a good starter in the NHL. We'll see, right? So Lankinen's the honorable mention, and he's the only honorable mention on the list, but Marc-Andre Fleury at $7 million. Colorado. So Colorado, Grubauer ends up leaving them as a free agent this summer. They didn't expect it. So they go out and they pick up Darcy Kemper. Darcy Kemper, now I'm going to stop putting million because I don't think I need to, because I think you guys all get it. $3.5 million cap hit for Darcy Kemper. He's an unrestricted free agent next summer. How soon does Joe Sakic sit down with him? And I would think it's once they're into the season and they see how things are going with Kemper. How soon does he sit down with him and talk to him about an extension, remembering what happened with Grubauer, where Grubauer ends up actually going to market and signs somewhere else? So if you're Colorado, you want to make sure that doesn't happen 2 years in a row. I would think they sit down with Kemper and either work out an extension or, again, watch the deadline and see if some big names get moved. Columbus, another goaltender. Oh, look at this. There's a lot of goalies in this part. Now, both goaltenders are technically unrestricted free agents next summer. But Elvis Merzlikins at a $4 million cap hit, it will be interesting to see what Columbus does. I would think they sit down with him as soon as possible and work out an extension as well. I'd be honestly really surprised if they don't. It feels like between Korpisalo and Merzlikins, they have more faith in Merzlikins. But it's going to be interesting to see a Columbus team that might be clawing back a little bit, going through a little bit of a retool here. What happens with their goaltending? Do both of them go? There's been Korpisalo rumors for at least a year now. Do we see Elvis rumors as well? Be interesting to see where they go with that. For Dallas, I thought about Pavelski. That almost qualifies as an honorable mention, doesn't it? But it's John Klingberg. John Klingberg's cap hit is $4.25 million for this upcoming season. They're already sitting down and working on an extension with him. I'd be surprised if they don't sign one. But he's turning 30. So this is where those contracts get a little dangerous. You sign a guy who's getting into his early 30s, you sign him to an extension, and 2 or 3 years into that extension, if it's a long-term deal, all of a sudden you might be regretting it. So we'll see what Dallas does with Klingberg and how this works out. Defensemen do tend to see their contracts age a little better than the forwards, but still, if they ended up signing into an 8-year deal, I would have some concerns with that. It feels like 8-year deals are kind of the in vogue thing again. I didn't expect that. Did you expect that? Really? Well, you expected it. There you go. Some people watching this just went, wow, did he just read my mind? Yeah. Or I heard you. I heard you. All right, Detroit. Going with a player who's in Detroit for this year. Might very well be a hired gun. That's Nick Leddy. Leddy's got a $5.5 million cap hit for this year. Calling it now, he may be a highly sought-after player at the trade deadline. Detroit is still not looking like they're going to be a playoff team this year. Picking up Nick Leddy from the Islanders, this is Steve Yzerman playing the long game. He may try to turn Leddy into draft picks and prospects at the deadline. And for Leddy, having a good season, it's 30 years of age, have a good season now, you can get a good contract later. And that's the thing. Guys in contract years, you have to keep an eye on them. Guys in contract years can have all of a sudden really good years. Like, what's going on? Well, their contract is due. Sometimes it's a good motivator. Be like, man, my feet hurt, but I get an extra $1 million if I go out there and play well, so I'm going to go out there and play well. Edmonton. So this may be a player that's on his final go-around. And it's interesting because at a $1.65 million cap hit, when Kyle Turris signed with the Islanders, we all signed with the Islanders. I get the orange and blue mixed up. I don't know what it is. But when he signed with the Oilers, he may end up with New York with the Islanders. But when he signed with the Oilers, we looked at that contract and said, wow, that's a good deal if he can bounce back. And he didn't. Turris didn't bounce back. So this is a guy who, if he doesn't have a good year this year, probably sits on the market next year. may find himself then on a tryout the year after, and may find himself on a league minimum deal. If he has a good year, he can bump that up. But again, it's on Turris. I think the Oilers will give him that opportunity. They definitely need that forward depth. And he's still a member of the team. So for right now, Kyle Turris has a chance. Florida, there's only one player. Only one player for Florida that I was like, man, how could it not be Barkov, right? So Alexander Barkov, cap hit of $5.9 million. He's not being moved at the deadline. There's no way. They have to sign Barkov. And I would think this video should age badly. Barkov should be signed within the next couple of weeks. They can't lose Barkov. The guy's a beast. And he's got the offense now to go with the defensive forward part of it. You have to keep him. You have to find a way to make it work. And I understand Florida might look at their situation with money out, money in, and say, we can't afford to spend a whole lot. But you have to have sustained success so you make more money, and you have sustained success by holding on to Alexander Barkov or Sasha Barkov. LA, this might be a player on his last go-around. So again, people are going to go to the end of the video. I don't understand. He's got Dustin Brown. Why? Dustin Brown, maybe on his last go-around. $5.875 million cap hit. We know that next summer, if he re-signs in LA, it will not be for $5.875 million. So his cap hit would drop next year, but again, being a contract year, does he have a big bounce back? In his all-around game, do we see like one of the best seasons out of Brown that we've seen in a long time? It's going to be interesting. Minnesota. So Minnesota last year, with the entrance of Kirill Kaprizov, it actually makes Victor Rask way better. Now, Victor Rask at a $4 million cap hit, even with Kaprizov on his line, that cap hit's still too high. But he was much better playing on a line with Kaprizov. If Kaprizov doesn't play this year for Minnesota, it's going to hurt Rask. It's his final year of his contract, and this is one of those players that, again, much like a few others on the board, might be looking at a huge drop in pay next year. But he might be willing to call Bill Guerin and say, so if I chip in some money here to help you get Kaprizov, can you bring him back? I mean, players have offered before to give up money from their contract to keep a line mate or a teammate. Might be in Rask's best interest to say, can we bring Kirill back, please? Because it really seemed to make Rask the best he's been, at least in his time in Minnesota, and probably better than he'd been his last year and a half, I want to say, in Carolina. I know it's been a while. Put it that way. Montreal. Interesting signing by Montreal this summer, but it's just for a year. And so Cedric Paquette, who's making $950,000, it's interesting because for Paquette, they're bringing him in. They're going to rely on him for some face-off work and to be a good defensive center. And so I'll be interested to see how it works for Montreal. Montreal doesn't have a lot of big name UFAs to be. So I thought, well, why not put Paquette on the board? Because he showed in Tampa, hey, he can help you become a winner. He can help you get over that hump. Can he do it for Montreal as well? And if Montreal is going to defy my expectation and finish in the top 4 in the Atlantic and maybe make the playoffs, a good season from Paquette could go a long way to getting him there. Nashville. I would be very surprised if they don't have Philip Forsberg signed to a new deal by the deadline. The Nashville Predators, they've got some interesting names on the list of guys maybe with bad contracts. They don't want Forsberg to have a bad contract, but right now, at a $6 million cap hit, they're getting really good value. So I would expect that they sit down and they work out an extension. I would think he gets a raise on that $6 million a year. I don't know how much. That's where the danger comes into of giving a guy too much term and too much money. You want to give him either term or too much money. You don't want to do both because both gets a GM fired very often. New Jersey. PK Subban's in a contract year. I don't think he gets a career year this year. Get ahead of myself, see? But Subban at $9 million, that's way too high. Next year, he's making less money. has to be making less. His cap hit has to be lower next year. But he can have a big bounce back for a New Jersey team that just added Dougie Hamilton. If that allows Subban to get better matchups, maybe get more points, maybe he gets a few more goals, maybe he gets competitive with Hamilton in the lineup, Subban may limit the amount of damage, and he may actually make not $9 million, but he may make closer to that $9 million than we would have expected, say, a year ago. So Subban, it's a contract year. We'll see how he does. New York Islanders. So while Lou Lamoriello's taking his sweet time with this year's restricted free agents, as well as other unrestricteds that were supposed to be coming back, Ryan Pulock at $5 million, that's a huge deal. Pulock, huge deal. The other thing is, with Pulock signed, now Pulock he's not limited in what he can ask for, but he's likely going to want about the same as Pulock, probably a little bit more, and Pulock is worth it. Pulock are one of the best tandems in the NHL on the blue line. And so I don't think the Islanders are going to let this one lapse. I don't think he hits the market. I think he gets signed probably before the deadline. Because, I mean the trade deadline when I say the deadline. Because, yeah, they can't afford to lose. You cannot afford to lose Ryan Pulock off that blue line. New York Rangers. A name that's been tied to the rumors that the Rangers are in on Jack Eichel. Mika Zibanejad, whose cap hit this year is a very friendly $5.35 million. I mean, very friendly to the Rangers, and very friendly also in the case that they want to trade him. Lots of teams would line up to make that move. Now, Zibanejad is due for a raise, and he's due for a long-term contract, and he's earned it. He had a slow start to the season, dealing with COVID. He said that he had a hard time getting that stamina back. Second half of the season, he was dynamite. And, you know, if you're the Flyers, you've watched Zibanejad, you're like, man, what does he score? Like 800 points a year? He's fantastic. So it's possible the Flyers might be in line to pick up Zibanejad as a free agent if he hits the market. I'm going to go ahead and predict he doesn't hit the market. But if Mika Zibanejad was acquired by the Sabres, wouldn't Buffalo want to make sure they've signed him to an extension first? So when I hear these Zibanejad for Eichel rumors, I go, well, that's just the easy thing. You just look and go, well, yeah, Zibanejad's a good young center, and Eichel's a good young center, and it probably makes something work. They have to get Zibanejad signed the same way that any team taking Jack Eichel would want to make sure that his health situation would be dealt with up front. You're not going to want to pick him up and then go, oh, wait, we're in the same gridlock that Buffalo was. So, yeah, Mika would need to sign an extension before he goes somewhere else, unless it's a trade deadline deal. But if the Rangers are in the hunt for a playoff spot, I'm going to say they go ahead and they get ready to bite the bullet. But, yeah, Mika's worth more than $5.35 million, I think. Ottawa doesn't have a lot either. Ottawa is right now, I mean, they have so few players that are in a position where they would qualify for unrestricted free agency. So I'm going with Chris Tierney, who's making $3.5 million. And again, that's a contract, that's a cap hit that's higher than what he likely gets in his next contract. And I will go ahead and guess he's a player that will be available at the trade deadline. He may be available before that. Ottawa doesn't seem to understand cap floor. They don't seem to be overly concerned with it if they do understand it. And I applaud them for not being overly concerned. Don't seem to be overly concerned. But once they sign Batherson, Gustafsson, and Brady Tkachuk, they'll pass the cap floor. Batherson and Tkachuk will get them to the cap floor because they're $7.5 million below. Those two will get them there. Philly, I went back and forth. So Claude Giroux is up this year. And Claude Giroux is their captain. And, you know, I have a Giroux jersey and all of that wonderful stuff. And Giroux, I really like the player. But I think the one to keep an eye on this year, Sean Couturier. Sean Couturier's cap hit is only $4.33 million. So $4.33 million is the cap hit for Couturier. You have to keep him if you're Philadelphia. They can't afford to lose Couturier. I would go as far as to say they need to find a way to keep Giroux as well. But between the two, Couturier is younger, and he is in his prime. Giroux, you could argue, is moving out of his prime, and so if they lost Giroux, that would be painful. But losing Couturier, that'd be more painful to me, anyways. But you guys can let me know what you think. Pittsburgh. The big name for Pittsburgh is Evgeny Malkin. Evgeny Malkin, $9.5 million cap hit. And we'll see how things go with that this year. Malkin's an interesting one for me. You know, of course, I had one of those moments where I look at the board and I go, that's not right. Yeah, it's an I, not a Y for Evgeny Malkin. But yeah, it's going to be a big year for Pittsburgh. Malkin, you have to think next summer, if he signs to stay in Pittsburgh, the cap hit would come down. At this stage in his career, wouldn't it come down? Or does it stay the same? Does he look at Ovechkin's contract and go, I'd like something like that? Or does it come down? Does it come down substantially and allow them to fill other parts of the roster? Or does Malkin say, yeah, I think I'll go play somewhere else next year? It'd be kind of fun to try something else, whether it's somewhere else in the NHL, whether it's going back to Europe, right? So Malkin, one of the biggest names you're going to see on the board. San Jose. See, now I'm worried about misspelling things. So I almost put an H into Tomas Hertl. $5.625 million for Hertl. And as long as he stays healthy and he finds that consistency, he's a 30-goal scorer. And I like Hertl a lot, and I don't think San Jose lets him go either. San Jose doesn't have a fantastic attack, so when somebody like Hertl is up, I would think they slap some money down to keep him. And then you get into the whole contract talk with San Jose, but I think they find a way to keep Hertl. Seattle. Yes, Seattle. Of course Seattle has somebody whose contract's up. And Mark Giordano's contract is up next year. I think he's got the right attitude about playing in Seattle. And I think it's a one-year thing. $6.75 million is the cap hit. I don't know that he stays in Seattle beyond 1 year. I think this is a one-year thing. And for Seattle, then they free up that cap space. They might be able to go out into next year's UFA market and really make a splash, right? Johnny Gaudreau would, that kind of thing, right? So we'll see what happens with Giordano this season. He's saying all the right things about being a leader and a public face of the team first year. We'll see how it goes. St. Louis. St. Louis, I went back and forth on whether or not to mention Parayko. So that can be considered me mentioning Colton Parayko. But David Perron at $4 million, I think that's the most impactful player that's up. Although, yes, Colton Parayko is fantastic. He can be one of the best defensemen in terms of being, like, one of the most underrated defensemen. I'll put it that way. But David Perron has given them tremendous value at points per dollar. Basically, for every dollar spent and the points he gets, it's been a fantastic contract. And we'll see whether or not he stays in St. Louis past this season, right? Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is going to have issues staying under the cap. We know this. We've discussed it over and over again. Andre Palat's $5.3 million, which is up next year. They may look at that and say, you know what? He's on his way out. They may look at that and say, we would love to give him another contract, but it may have to come down because we want to spend money on other players as well. And in order to balance things and to get ready for the next round of guys who are going to want raises, Palat might be a guy that they say, we think we can replace this player in their production for less. But $5.3 million, UFA next summer. We'll see what happens. Tampa, it's going to be a balancing act with the cap for them all the time. Toronto. Just one name with Toronto that to me really stands out. And that's Morgan Rielly. $5 million cap hit. And there are those in Leafland that think he's overrated. I've honestly got a chuckle out of a few that I've seen online that have basically cited advanced stats and high danger chances and said, oh, we can just let him walk. We can just replace that. The one thing is, you need to, who are you replacing them with and what are you spending to get them? So to me, Morgan Rielly, it's important that the Leafs try to hold on to the player and keep him. And the idea that, well, you just go find some, who else is out there that you're going to get for, Morgan Rielly's job. So Rielly, he may have a great year for Toronto this year. I'm expecting him to do that. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with that blue line every year. Every year in Toronto, the blue line is very, very key to watch and say, okay, so has it improved from year to year? And again, people argue back and forth about whether it has or hasn't. Vancouver, Vancouver does not have a lot of expiring UFA contracts. They really don't. So I went with Yaroslav Halak, who may be in his last go around at $1.5 million for this 1 year in Vancouver. He's going to have a lot of pressure to kind of prove himself after the way things ended in Boston. So we'll see if he bounces back for the Canucks. But I went with Jaro Halak because, again, they don't have a lot of unrestricted free agents to be next summer. They would have, but they moved them all to Arizona. So, ta-da, they're all gone. Vegas. So, for Vegas, there's Riley Smith, one of the originals, right? One of the original misfits for the Vegas Golden Knights. $5 million is the cap hit for one more year. He did not have a very good year. I think he's due for a bounce back, and I think a contract year could be a great motivator. I think Vegas would love to keep that line together of Marchessault, Smith, and Carlson. And so I think there's a good chance he stays in Vegas. He may take less money to stay in Vegas and finish out his career. But at that cap hit and with the 1 year left, Riley Smith could have a big bounce back. Washington. Justin Schultz, $4 million. So Justin Schultz comes into Washington, plays very well, and is he due for a raise at the end of this? Is he due to stick around? Does he get more money? What happens with Schultz? It'll be interesting to see. So yeah, Justin Schultz at $4 million for the Washington Capitals. There's definitely pressure on them to prove that they're not receding from the top teams in the league and that they can still be a contender. And a good season from Schultz on the blue line would definitely help with that. Winnipeg. A player is betting on himself. I like players that bet on themselves. So Andrew Kopp signed a 1 year extension with Winnipeg for $3.64 million. If Kopp plays the way he did last year, that's a bargain. If he has trouble with his production this year, then that cap hit, he may not be able to bring it up in the next contract. But with Kopp's overall effort and the amount of heart this guy has on the ice, I've learned not to bet against him. But there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.